Alright, this is my tutorial assignment. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to use Sight Reading Factory on the Music First software suite. One of the first things I'm going to talk about is the instruments they have available. Obviously, they have a very wide array for whichever ensemble you're doing, be it instrumental or voice. Just want to go over some of the strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, they have a lot here. A lot of strings. I mean, all of the strings, obviously. A lot of woodwinds that you might not expect. All of the brass. A couple weaknesses though. In the piano, you can only do piano. You can't isolate right or left hand or anything like that. Um, Voice actually has a very, very strong selection. As you can see, there's some ensembles in there. I'm going to talk about those in a bit. You can have tenors doing bass clef and the treble octave below clef. You even have some guitar in here, strings. Obviously, everything's here. Tenor clef for the cellos and treble for violas, just to strengthen those clefs. Woodwinds is where it starts to really shine. As you can see, they have flute and piccolo. They have the entire recorder family, which I thought was interesting, minus the sopranino. Obviously, oboe and English horn, bassoon and tenor and bass clef, contrabassoon. One of the weaknesses here, though, is that they have, as you can see, almost the entire clarinet family. And while they do have E flat contra alto, they're actually missing the B flat contra bass, which I thought was a little bit interesting. As you can see, you've got the whole saxophone family, barring bass saxophone. They even have chromatic harmonica, which is part of the reason that I'm kind of shocked that they don't have the B flat contra bass, considering they have great bass recorder, and I'm not really sure how often that gets used or why that would be on here before contrabass clarinet, but I'm sure it'll be on here eventually. Another weakness, obviously you have trombone in all three clefs. I'm not sure how often they actually get to read an alto clef. You do have both clefs for euphonium, but with upper level ensembles, if your trumpets are ever going to be doing anything other than B flat, so they're going to be playing C trumpet or piccolo trumpet, that's not on here yet. As far as I'm aware, this is an early stage of the program still, so I'm sure it'll be added in eventually. Now, percussion is probably the most limited, I would say, considering the only rhythmic instrument they have is snare. Now, obviously, I feel like you could probably just do any instrument. Not. It's fairly limited on the rhythm, the non-pitched instruments. But next up, I want to show you guys, as you can see over here, it has instrument level, and the level is one of the cool things. We're just going to go in here, it doesn't really matter what instrument, we're going to go to B-flat trumpet, just so I can show you this part. As you can see, they have 6 ranges of difficulty, or 6 different levels of difficulty, I should say, and then a custom. First level, you can see it shows you a range. There we go. It's got the range right here, and then the rhythms that will be included, any rests, and the size of intervals that could be covered in these excerpts. And as you see, as you go up each level, the range gets extended just a little bit. They add some rhythms and some rests. Level 1 and 2 have the same intervals. Level 3, the interval starts to expand. They continue building the range. And on the trumpet, this is actually really going to cap out the range on the lower end. And they'll just extend up from here, adding in rhythms. You can see they added in ties. And also over here on the right, you can see that they add in different markings, such as dynamics articulations. And as you keep going up, all the way up to 6, when they finally add in the last few things. And then the only thing with this that I find a little, not necessarily a weakness, but leaves something to be desired, is that even at level 3, when it has these 8ths and 16ths, you might see some syncopated rhythms, and it immediately, on level 2, as soon as you go above a quarter note, you also have dotted quarters, which you might not necessarily in a really early beginning ensemble be doing quite yet, which is where this custom really comes in handy. You can select any rhythms that you want them to have in a really basic ensemble. Let's say you want to have your standard whole note, half note, quarter note, and you want them to have eighth notes, but not dotted quarters because they're just not ready for that yet. That's not something they've learned. You don't have to add those. You don't have to add any rests. And then this is also kind of a gray area. I mean, I've done all 3 levels over and over trying to figure out what the difference is, and really the only thing I could really find is that as you go from easy to medium to hard, they put different rhythmic types next to each other a little bit more frequently. So once you get up into the higher stuff where you've got sixteenths and all these dotted things and whatnot, they'll start putting triplets next to sixteenth, next to syncopated rhythms, next to dotted 8/16 rhythms. So it just gets kind of harder, I guess, to stay consistent. The rhythms aren't as consistent as this goes up, which they could definitely have some definitions here to make it a bit easier to understand. Then, of course, you've got your syncopated rhythms, whether you want them to do that or not. Ties across measures, whether you want them to have stylistic things like staccato slurs and accents, which are really cool. I'm going to go ahead and make this one of the upper level difficulties just so we can see. And you can even uncheck things, like if you don't want them to have anything above a half note, or if you don't even want them to have half notes because you want them to work on their technique. Let's go ahead and add some rests in here. I'm not going to do any 16th rests because, as I said, it gets kind of crazy, especially when you set the rhythm difficulty up to, we'll add them anyway just so you guys can see what it does. Now, one thing that I'll get into a little bit more once we look at it is that sometimes you can get some really good examples. Sometimes you don't necessarily get anything. It's just kind of random sometimes. So now that you've got your rhythm set in for custom, you can even go to the pitches. And one of the nice things that I like about this is, I mean, you could have them, if you don't want, I mean, we have our B-flat trumpets right now, right? So you want them working on their high register, you could have them playing not even, like, working just this little top octave, or maybe a little bit more. Maybe you want them going up to in E-flat. And you can set it, I mean, as high as you want. There's obviously a cap eventually, but I don't even know. What note is that? That's going to be a, like, I mean, that's double C, I believe. Which, obviously, I mean, if they're using this software, I mean, I guess you could have kids playing up there in a really advanced high school setting. That'd be outstanding. And then, I mean, obviously, no trumpet's going to be playing that low. So, I mean, you can set it anywhere you want. Let's say you want them to work on the high register. We're just going to leave it right here for my purposes. And then here you can set the different kinds of leaps you want, whether you want them, we're going to say no greater than an octave, assuming this is a high level thing. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it'll be kind of random. We're going to leave accidentals out. Sometimes that'll just, it kind of screws up the flow of the example they get when they're using the software. So this is, I really like this because you can have them work on specific ranges. It just lets you cater more to your ensemble with the customs. Now, with time signatures, let's say, you know, our trumpets just can't handle compound meter. So we're going to give them just 6/8. But I did want to talk about one more thing here before we continue on to the key signature. Obviously, the only half note getting the beat time signature they have is cut time, which is 2/2. And they don't go into any asymmetrical meter. They don't have 6/4 or 5/4 or anything like that. They stop at 4 beats to a measure as well. Well, I guess these could be... Oh, there's 5/4 right there, actually. Never mind. I lied. I don't know how I missed that the past few times I looked at this. But it doesn't go any lower than 6/8, so you can't have 3/8, you can't have 4/8, 5/8, anything like that. Isn't a huge deal. I'm sure they'll add it eventually. Another nice thing is you can have random. And the kids can just sit there and they can just pump out different time signatures. We're going to leave it on 6/8 for now. And in the key signatures, because we have it set to custom, it has the full all major minor available. I don't know why it says A sharp minor. I don't know why you wouldn't just have it as B flat minor, but whatever. And then again, you can have them set to random. And just have them going through anything. And if you go back and you change the levels, it'll restrict the key signatures a bit more. As you can see here, we've only got 6 major and 6 minor available. And I'm not really sure what dictates that either. Um, I mean, as you can see, level 5 actually has more available than level 6. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm sure that'll be fixed at some point eventually. We can go back to the custom. Oh, we have to set this all again. Okay. Leave all of that in there. Set this back up to the upper octave. Sorry about that. Okay. And I mean, let's say your trumpets are really struggling with D flats when they're playing through music, so we're gonna give them A flat major. And then of course you can set the length of measures. In 6/8 you can only go up to 24 measures, but if you go back and you set it to 2/4, you can actually go all the way up to 48. And I don't know if that'll ever change. We're just gonna set it to 12 measures for now. And you can opt to put in note names. We're not going to do that. And then we're just going to hit regular practice mode for now because we're on the student side of the software. And then we'll talk about the time practice mode here in a minute. But so here's our first example. They can set it to whatever tempo they like. This will also control how quickly it plays back. I'm just going to set it down to, let's put it up to 112. And let's play that for you guys so you can... I'm going to slow it down, actually. Obviously, that is incredibly challenging, which, if we're going towards, or gearing towards a more advanced ensemble, I mean, this is obviously not exactly the best sight reading, even for advanced high school, just because of the difficulty level, but we're going to slow it down just a little, do it one more time, and obviously, I'll let it finish. This is actually one of the better examples I've gotten. Musically speaking, kind of flows, and it sounds pretty cool. Obviously, the staccatos don't always make sense. Luckily, the staccatos and accents and slurs and ties, they actually kind of made sense in this excerpt. And it's not the best sight reading thing, right? But this is just for them practicing. This is their own thing. And then you can just sit here and hit another one, and another one, and another one, and they can just keep going and going and going, and they can go, and they're changing all of these settings themselves. Now, on the timed practice mode, this is, again, for their own practice, but I believe this is also where you can do sight reading assignments, and you can set the time on the teacher side. I can't show you that, unfortunately, because I don't have access, but I'm going to show you guys what all of these different little checkboxes do, and the tempo is the tempo it'll give you just before your final little run through once your time is up. So we're going to set it to just 10 seconds just so I can show you guys the different features. I'm going to go ahead and check all of these boxes. We're just going to say 96 so that it gets through the excerpt reasonably quick. And we'll go down to 8 measures from 12. And so as you can see, we've got our little timer down up here. It's going to count down. We've got however much time we set it to, the student has to look at their excerpt, and then once this timer goes up, it'll have a brief period, and then it's going to count down. There's your little cursor. The one thing that I don't like about the cursor is that it moves with the music. Some people might like that. Personally, I don't. I think that it's a little bit distracting, I would think, to the students. It kind of takes a lot of the responsibility off them as well, I feel, by showing them when they need to move, rather than them feeling when they need to move. Disappearing measures, as you just saw, as the cursor moved across the piece, once the measure was finished, the measure went away. I don't really know what the purpose of that is either. I do like the metronome track, and I like the cursor in the sense that they know if they've gotten off, but with an upper level ensemble, that's kind of the part of the responsibility you want to put on them. Then once you've finished and your time's up, and again, if this was an assignment, there would be a little recording, and they could hear themselves. but it doesn't give you the option to hear it until after, so we're going to go ahead and play it. So obviously, that way they can kind of compare what they've just played, if they can remember hearing it, or if it's an assignment on the teacher end, they'll have the option to listen back to their recording. And you kind of compare what it's supposed to sound like with what they actually have done. So, I mean, it's a really nice little thing, especially for assignments. Unfortunately, it doesn't grade them, so you do have to go back and listen, which you should be doing anyway, of course. But you don't really have any idea, and the students don't really get any feedback on what they could have done, and they kind of have to assess themselves orally, which is challenging depending on the level of the ensemble. Now that we've done that, so obviously, like I said, teacher side, you can do assignments, set the length, set the tempo, all of those levels and whatnot. I'm sure there's a way to make sure each student has the same example to read. Unfortunately, I don't know that for certain, and I mean, obviously you would want to be most fair. But one of the really cool things, we're going to go back to the main dashboard though. I'm going to go sight read some more. One of the cool things about this is the ensemble function. So as you can see, we've got concert band, and if you click on that, we're just going to do level 3, and I'm just going to hit 4/4, F major, whatever. The way that it works is it doesn't have specific instruments. It just does it based on the clef. So you've got your C treble. We all know which instruments those are: flutes, piccolos, oboes. And then your B flat treble, E flat treble, F treble, and then your C bass. Obviously, none of our bass clefs are reading anything other than C, typically. And then the only weakness I really have with the band section is here that we've got our snares doing just really basic rhythms. I mean, and there's no rolls, there's no anything like that in our snare, and there's no mallet percussion. Although I guess they could probably just read the C treble, but then they're not doing any. It's only going to be you can have them doing 4 mallet anything. It's all in unison. Whereas if we go back to our ensembles, you can see here that in the choir area they have multi-part, which is actually a really cool thing that I want to talk about a little bit, because it's a little bit different than the other settings that you can have it do, or that you can set it to. And obviously with the band, you wouldn't do that as an assignment because, I mean, they're not going to be doing recordings without you there. So that would be something that you'd print out. And actually, if we go back, if you can see right up here, there's actually a little print button, and you can print the parts and the score for yourself, so you can obviously watch. Not that you would need a score over the whole parts, since it's all in unison anyway. But anyway, back to the multi-part choir. You can do anywhere to 2 to 4 voices, which is great, because as we've been talking about different difficulties, you can just do soprano alto if you've got a women's chorus, or tenor bass if you've got men's chorus, or soprano alto if you have a boys choir in an elementary school, or just a mixed choir where their boys are all still sitting before the voice change. We're going to go ahead and set it to SATB. We're going to go next, and one of the things that is a little bit different in the choir area is, especially in the multi-part, you can't do custom. There's no custom option here. And it also doesn't give you any ranges. But one of the nice things is it does show you rhythmic relationship. With SATB, you can't go below level 3, which does have some slight rhythmic discrepancies between parts. And as we can see here, dynamics and ties are checked, and then, of course, the leaps go up and the rhythms go up. But again, you don't see any ranges here. We're just going to go up to level 5, which has heavy rhythmic, and it only does 8 measures. That also goes for all full ensemble examples. As we saw earlier, you can do note names, but with the choral, you can do fixed do, solfege, movable do, and la bass minor, or movable do with do bass minor, depending on your realm of thought. And again, you have your regular practice mode, which with choral multipart is probably what you're going to do, unless I'm not really sure what this would really do. I mean, all they would do is hear how their part fits in afterward. So at that point, you could just do single voices. We're going to go ahead and look at these examples that we've gotten. 4/4 F major level 5. So here we've got it. We're going to go ahead and play it, just hear it real quick. So obviously this isn't exactly the most challenging. We do have parts moving at different points, which gives it, but I mean this seems fairly simple for level 5. I actually don't see any 16th notes, which might not actually be level 5. Yeah, no, it's my fault. And then they use terms like slight and heavy rhythmic independence, which I don't really feel like this is all that heavy. I mean, you really only have people doing quarter notes and eighth notes. You have one dotted here. But anyway, so that's really the only thing here is there's no custom and you can't set ranges. Which obviously if you're in a middle school with kids going through the voice change, that's going to be an issue. We're going to go back to the dashboard though, because there's one last thing I wanted to talk about. And the cool thing with the ensemble stuff versus independence is you can cater to each section when you're giving out assignments on the teacher side. I mean, if one section is having really big issues, like I said like earlier with the trumpets, with their upper register and they don't do compound meter well, you can assign them that to practice. If you have certain sections, especially in a beginner band, especially if you have heterogeneous classes, or if you don't, but you notice that different sections have different issues, I mean, you can very much cater to them with the custom area, giving them specific rhythms, specific time signatures, key signatures. But so this is the reports. I'm not sure if you can access this for each student on the teacher side or not. If not, of course, you could require them to submit like screenshots. But so this first one we're looking at here is configurations. It's just showing like the frequency, how many compositions they've done at what level with different instruments. So we can see here the one I've done the most is bassoon and bass clef, custom level and I've done it 8 times. All times have been 4/4 in F major. I mean, this is mostly, as you can see, just me playing around with it, and there are multiple pages as well. But the really cool stuff here is beyond the configurations, you can go to sessions, and you can see when they've accessed it, how many compositions they went through, and for how long they spent total. Obviously here they're timed, these were the timed practice sessions, and then in the regular practice session it times much more precisely. You can see what percentages they spend on each instrument, or you have spent. That's not really going to be important in any middle or high school setting. Keys, definitely important. I mean, this is really cool because it breaks down what they've practiced. You can see whether they're taking the easy way out or whether they know they have a weakness somewhere and they've been practicing that specifically. And then there's somewhere in here should be random key signature. I actually don't see it. Maybe we haven't done that. I thought I saw that earlier. Either way, you can also go down to time signature, see what they've been doing. 4/4 is what I've done mostly just for consistency. How many of each, and then obviously the percentages, same as key signature, and then, oh my gosh, it's really annoying if you have to click on it exactly right or it won't let you scroll down. There we go. Measure count, whether they're really challenging themselves, and 48, as we said earlier, is only available in 2/4, or whether they're just doing short little excerpts, and length really shouldn't be all that important. The level that they've done, whether they're challenging themselves, custom, I'd like to see this broken down a bit more with what they did, because they could just, I did really hard customs. Well, I mean, you're going to have to go back and check time signatures and key signatures and measure count to actually verify that, because it doesn't say anything. But within levels 1 through 6, you can see. And then level progress over time. It really only shows average per month, rather than giving you very detailed things day by day or week by week. So I'd love to see this updated more in the future. And then same compositions over time. It just shows how many they've done per month. But that's about it. Like I said, there's some really cool stuff. Custom is probably going to be your best friend here, because it just caters so much more to what is in your section, rather than just leaving it up to chance that they get syncopated rhythms or not, or whether they get really, really difficult things, or whether you want them working on specific ranges. That's all I've got. Unfortunately, we couldn't do the teacher side of things, but hopefully this will help you out and help you get the best out of the Sight Reading Factory software.